Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is your boy Skip, aka Skip and Tosh, with my man Wes here from Thinking Critical. Go ahead and say what's up to the people, Wes.
What's going on, everybody? Hope you're ready to talk some Powers of 10.
Oh yeah, and powerful it was, and for some people, brain bending. It definitely kind of broke my brain a little bit, but we like extending and reaching out these crazy concepts that Hickman is coming up with. So we're gonna get into Powers of 10. This was number 4, right?
Absolutely.
Right on.
Something
Actually,
sinister.
something sinister, which I'm gonna do a Superman move and jump over and grab my book real quick. Watch this. This is movie magic.
All right. I'm telling you, this book was it was pretty crazy. So Hickman has basically put the pedal to the metal for the last 3 issues. Action packed. We're losing characters left and right. What's going on here? And then he dials it back a bit, does a bit more world building, and makes everyone go, "Oh, well, it's not exactly what I thought it was." And
which is
now
which
he's gonna, yeah,
he's notorious for that too. Like build something up, build this world up, and then everything that you thought, and all the little breadcrumbs that he, kind of laid along the way, they mean something, but they don't always mean what you think they do. And that's what we love about him. It's not predictable storytelling, a la some people that will remain nameless. But this is top tier writing right here. Fantastic book, crazy cover. Wes, just from the first panel, us just jumping right in. Well, actually, the first page, we got a quote. Professor X here, I fear our needs will far outlast our desires. We have many hard choices ahead of us.
absolutely.
And then we jump right in, something sinister. Approaching the gate and the fortress, did you? I had never personally seen this fortress before. I wasn't recalling it. Is this something new to you as well, or is this something that you were familiar with?
It's new to me. I've never seen it. It's pretty imposing. It's really cool. One of the best things that the color artist Marte Gracia does is like the first story is kind of like red hued. The second story is got like a yellow tint to it, and then the third story is in blue. And we're gonna get to some details about that one after, but it's very imposing, look really cool, and yeah, it was the first time I've seen Bar Sinister.
Yeah, same here. And with Professor Magneto, or excuse me, Professor Magneto. This is an
New
onslaught
character.
here. I know, right? But with Professor X and Magneto approaching Mister Sinister's fortress or whatever, they go, and it seems like they're greeted by Mister Sinister there. But as Wes talked about, Bar Sinister and all these different clones, I was at first thrown for a loop, but then I immediately remember this is a man who, like Nathaniel Essex, loves to play with the gene pool. What's a natural progression of playing with genetics, copying and duplicating genetics? So I love the call, that call, and probably my favorite panel of the whole entire thing was early in the beginning with Magneto, kind of as Bar Sinister is up there and or not real, like kind of. Oh yeah, you might get in, but you might not. You got to go through me, kind of dilly daddling. Like
Not
Magneto's
with
like, I
that
got no
cape.
time. Nope, not with that.
That's what he told him, right?
That's right. Magneto just dispatches of him, and pretty much tells him, "You're gonna let us in, or you're gonna deal with the consequences." And I
I
kind of
can't
like,
remember the exact quote. What's the question that he asked him? Why he's got
this.
him up in the air?
This man needs to decide if he wants to escort us inside or if he wants to continue thusly and suffer the consequences.
Exactly.
And then, like, the next panel, very comedically, 2 minutes later, Mister Sinister, I present to you Mutants Magneto and Professor Charles Xavier. Like,
Yep.
such great storytelling. After we have a House of X number 4, and we've got casualties, we're losing people, like Wes referenced earlier. Now we get some levity, a little bit of laughs, a little bit of lightheartedness. Again, to me, just masterful pacing by Jonathan Hickman, knowing when to bring in the levity, when to, right after things have been so serious. But we go into this throne room of Sinister, and Wes, I'm kind of gonna let you give us your impressions on like kind of how that whole scene went.
Well, so my first impression is it feels totally out of place in this comic book. I was reading it and I was like, this feels like it's like I'm reading Alice in Wonderland. I'm not reading Jonathan Hickman's X-Men. So some of the jokes are funny. They didn't all land for me, and I bet this section of the book is somewhat divisive among Hawks and Pox readers, where they're like, it's too jokey, and I totally get that. I'm somewhere in the middle. It's kind of silly, but there's some really awesome information in there, and so Charles comes up and he's like, "Hey, we know you're doing a lot of genetic experiments. We're not going to tell you exactly how you know, but we think that you should start focusing on the mutant genes, maybe working with that." And which he replied, "I've worked with mutant genes and I didn't like the results." And so it sounds like maybe there's going to be a barrier to that, and then well, he's executed by another Mister Sinister.
And it took someone else to point out to me that other Mr. Sinister had like a Glock in his hand and totally just like blew the other one away. And I'm with you. I'm kind of in the middle on the humor. I think it was appropriately timed, but Jonathan Hickman's no Chip Zdarsky, even though they're very good friends. And I saw like a picture of them and Al Ewing together in a room, which was pretty funny. But I think the timing of the comedy, for me personally, worked very well. I could see how it could be divisive. The funny thing to me, like as a callback, is the copy of Sinister that blew the other one's head off has the cape and is the Sinister that we're familiar with seeing from the late 80s, early 90s, that Jim Lee type Mr. Sinister. And that is the one that comes forward and basically is like, okay, let me hear you out. You've been talking to the other ones. I've heard some of it. What's kind of your end game? Of course, Professor Xavier tells him, hey, this is, like Wes said, mutant gene pool. Let's start working with that. I would like to see us collect a database of mutant DNA. And after you complete the studies, I need you to forget everything that you remembered from that time. And I thought that was dope. It makes sense. All of the information from the last Moira that is, getting passed along from year one, they're going through and starting to execute that plan. Xavier's still in the chair, but something that's interesting right here is that, remember, we have multiple copies of this Sinister. And I think that's what rolls over into the whole Red Diamond thing. After that scene, after Professor X tells him, hey, and then I need you to forget it, we roll over into one of the infographics, Red Diamond. It's like a gossip column, which for this can be another thing that I could see throwing people off ultimately. But what's funny is, me being a normal Hickman reader, he always takes things from society and kind of plays jokes on society for the things that society is interested in. So naturally, it's a gossip column. And all of these Sinister secrets, to me, seem like they're attached to a copy of Sinister.
Oh, yeah?
So that's what I took from it. It all seems like it was taken from a copy of Sinister. As we've seen, there's multiple Sinisters. I think a counterpart is, since there's multiple Moiras, there's also multiple Sinisters. And I think as we go through those, that Sinister that they thought that they were dealing with, which was the ultimate one, may not be the ultimate one, and they may have exposed their plan to him, and I think he still might screw them over. But
that's what I want to talk about. So it's really interesting, because when Charles runs into Erik, he immediately says, "Here's everything I know," passes the information, says, "I need to work with you." He gets to Mr. Sinister, and he doesn't tell him anything. He does not pass him the information. He does not want him to be a partner like Erik. He's manipulating him. He's trying to give him a certain piece of information and try to use him for his own personal gain. And I don't think it's going to go well for him at all. I think he's going to find Mr. Sinister to be a very worthy adversary once he figures out what his whole plan is. What did you think about that?
I agree, and I think that's part of it. I think, they ended up revealing enough, and it's obvious, that they only want him to know so much. Then I need you to forget it all. But I think since they didn't tell it to the ultimate Sinister, they told it to a copy. That's what I mean. I think he is going to be like, there's a reason why you guys don't want me to be a part of this. Yeah, like you want me to be a part of it, but you don't want me to know everything, and I want to know everything because I want the tea, I want the gossip, all that stuff. So I think that that it is foreshadowing some crazy stuff that's going to happen. And I've got a pretty big theory about it, especially since there was some reference points later on in the book. So I'm sure we're really, really going to dig into that because Wes and I are very interested in that whole thing. So as we go through the infographic, the gossip column, the red diamond, obviously a reference to Mister Sinister's red diamond. It goes through all 10 of those, and then we get to X to the first power, which is them 10 years, the 10th year, so to speak. And
it's also the House of X time frame.
Yes, the House of X time frame, exactly. Thank you for pointing that out. So now we get a little chunk of House of X. I'm going to throw something out about the art for a quick second. I totally thought Mike Deodato took over the art for a minute.
Yeah.
It's just, the textures and the different things that Deodato likes to use in his art were like totally there in the trees and the forest, and then some of the zipatone type things in the background. And I don't remember RB Silva using much of that before in the book, so it wasn't a bad thing. It was a good thing. I like Mike Deodato. I just have to take him in doses because his style is so pronounced that sometimes like I can only get through a book. I can't read a full trade of Deodato art. I got to take him like in doses, but I do like him. He's one of my favorites. But we have Professor X and Cypher arriving on Krakoa in the Blackbird. And something that I pointed out to someone else immediately, we go from Charles in the wheelchair to Charles walking. And we still don't know how Charles is walking yet. Wes, what did you think about the beginning of Cypher and Professor X's conversation on Krakoa?
It was pretty cool. So, Cypher and them are kind of joking around, and then once Cypher realizes where he's at, he's like, "What? I'm on Krakoa. Isn't this where you take mutants to die?" And there's also some interesting stuff in there where when he's touching leaves, like they start digitizing, kind of like with his arm and stuff. So he already has like a weird connection to the island. So I really like the introduction. And then when he finally gets to communicate with Krakoa, that's probably my favorite part of the whole comic book, to be completely honest.
I like that part so much, especially how as Charles was communicating with Krakoa, and we see Krakoa personified with the face, though we've already seen that, knowing because of Powers of 10 that ultimately Cypher and Krakoa end up merging. And we've already seen them merge because they were part of that mission that got the information into the Ninth Moira to send for Wolverine to kill the Ninth Moira, and then that life to start again, which leads into where we are now in this book. But so it's cool to see that face. And Professor X was communicating, and Cypher, being a technopathy wizard, was like, I don't think you're pulling everything from Krakoa that's really there. It sounds like you're talking like really basic. And I'm willing to bet that your connection with Krakoa is more on an empathic level, knowing how Krakoa feels than everything that Krakoa is saying, because Xavier had mentioned, Krakoa says that Krakoa is sad. Which is interesting because then we get some backstory that I think is going to play a bigger role in it than everything else. Wes, what did you think about the backstory of Krakoa originally being almost like a married island and then being split, and then Apocalypse and the Four Horsemen all being a part of that?
There's so much. It was really cool, and the art's really awesome. And but there's some really confusing stuff in here because I believe it starts out. Was it Arakko?
Arakko and Krakoa, yeah.
Arakko, it starts out, and then all of a sudden the Twilight Sword shows up. Where did that come from? Isn't that like a Thor artifact? Like, isn't that supposed to be in cosmic? Where is it? How is it coming up from the Earth? And I guess it's split Arakko into two islands, Krakoa, and I guess we'll call it his brother island. So there's two Sinian islands left, and then I guess some wicked beast came out, and yes, Apocalypse had to go and force the other half of the island into the chasm where they came and sealed it all up. So somewhere in the depths is another sentient land where these guys came from, and it has to lead to something. And it's somewhat hinted at in the Krakoa guide on how it operates. It says in the little bottom on the note that they're doing subterranean they're built subterranean laboratories and stuff. It's like they're gonna run into that thing, aren't they?
I see it happening. To me, in my mind, I was like, because as we know, some artifacts that are cosmic end up on the planet Earth. So in my mind, I'm like, this is probably like a Odin era type thing. And to me, it makes sense. Like if there was someone that was going to go up against such a weapon, and possibly defeated, it would be the first mutant. You know, the first one that is the evolved human being, and that would be Apocalypse, him being the first mutant. So in my mind, me just being like a fan of lore and stuff like that, the connections that I started making panned out. But ultimately, we won't really know and have the answers until Hickman kind of gives them to us, and he knows not to give them all to you early because then you're not going to be interested anymore. But what I like, and it was Okara was the one land, and from Okara, with it being split, it split into Araco and Krakoa.
Okay, my bad.
Yeah, no. Well, they're so close.
It's all new,
right? Exactly.
At least to me.
It's to me too. But I like that we got this story because you and I had talked about the Krakoan tumor before and how it was and how because Krakoa can't sense it, and now it's starting to make sense to me. Krakoa can't sense it because it's so native to Krakoa. It was once a part of Krakoa, so that whole idea that it's so close to me that I didn't know it was there or I couldn't sense it. So I got a feeling that Krakoan tumor, that's where Charles is going to ask Sinister to go and do the work and make all those mutants and build that mutant army. So now with the humans, being pissed off and the forge being destroyed and everything and the mother mold being taken offline and sent into the sun, they're going to go ahead and wage war on Krakoa. They're going to send everybody, and that 120 something number is going to vastly grow as the orchestra.
Should be 190.
190.
It was 198 before the last comic, and then the 8-man team all died.
They all died. So now 190. But Orcus got enacted because it sensed, mutant activity that it couldn't put its finger on. And I think it can sense it because it's not Krakoa, but Krakoa can't sense it. And I think they're going to build a whole army. And instead of having the Chimera from before in the previous timeline, I think it's going to be a whole different thing. I think this time, that's why he wanted to do the database again. But this time, we're just going to duplicate the actual mutants. We're not going to combine the genes. We're just going to duplicate them. That's what Charles is going to want to do. And of course, Nathaniel Essex, a.k.a. Sinister, is going to have a slightly different plan. And I think that's why it references later that the tumor grew and grew out of control. And I'm going to tell you how I think that plays into X to the third powers timeline in the Phalanx.
All right, so you noticed that too, huh?
Oh yeah. I got a keen eye for this Hickman stuff. But we go on. We get out of that story. Pretty much, we see that Cypher has already grown a faster bond through technopathy with Krakoa. So Cypher and Krakoa are beginning to speak. Another fantastic color job and art with the panels of Professor X getting back in the Blackbird and pretty much giving Cypher a dose and a vision of what's needed and what's to come, and says, hey, how long is it going to take you to build an infrastructure to where you can build a language and implant it into the other mutants so they can communicate with Krakoa? Of course, he says like 6 months if things go well, a year if I suck at what I'm doing. And you see Professor X toss him his bag, and he's like, all right, then you better get to it. Mm-hmm. And then we run into an infographic of the current Krakoa system. Wes, do you have your book in front of you or with you right now?
No, I have it digitally. I can bring it up.
Not a problem. I'll go ahead and I'll take care of this one. So we see the Krakoa system, and it talks about how the interface was built by Douglas Ramsey, a.k.a. Cypher, a translation program so that other mutants can interact with the island without needing Cypher to act as a go-between. We've got 4 different departments with transit and monitoring being taken care of by Sage, defense and observation being taken care of by Black Tom Cassidy, which I thought that was cool, secondary external systems by Trinary, and Overwatch and data analysis by Beast, which we saw in House of X because he was down there with Professor Xavier, the Cuckoo sisters, as well as Storm to communicate with the team as they were sent out to the Forge to get rid of the Mother Mold. And then we got that little note. Wes, if you've got it pulled up, that was a little note that you and I were talking about at the bottom of that infographic.
Yeah, I got it. While there has been no actual evidence of a Krakoan skunkworks existing, there are rumors of a massive subterranean laboratory where Forge is busy building biological machines that could possibly be used to manage a mutant expansion on the island. I think this is a terrible idea.
And for those of you who aren't familiar with Skunk Works, I'm paraphrasing here. It was that company that got built in like inside of another company by employees, and eventually, while they were in between working on projects for their normal job, they worked on this project, and this company ended up springing out and overtaking the company that it was built inside of. So again, just going back to that whole Krakoa tumor not being recognized by Krakoa and taking advantage of that. And only mutants can go in there. Remember, the humans had their 3 things, the 5 extra years of extended life, the super antibiotic, and the cure for mental illness with the Krakoan synthesized pill. And then mutants had the biome. Mutants had the gateways to get to and from with the twin or the sister plant. And then it was the Krakoa tumor. And I think that's what we're referencing here with the whole Skunkworks thing. And then finally, now, Wes, this part is so big, I'm proposing that we possibly might have to do a part 2 because, this whole part with X to the 3rd year 1000, gets really, 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 really deep. But in about 5 minutes, can you and I kind of go through this real quick and then kind of wrap it up, put a bow in it, and then we might have to do a part 2 for just this section?
Yeah, we can always do that.
Okay, sounds good. So here we are, year 1000. We are with the elder who, I guess they're called the librarian. I'm still not 100% sure who this is. I'm not sure if it's Professor X who lasted this long. I'm not sure if this is a form of Moira. I'm not sure if this is Moira and Professor X together because Mister Sinister put them together so they can last longer. I'm not sure. But all I know is we're finally returned with the Phalanx being there. And these, the librarian and these people getting ready to assimilate so they can ascend. And Wes, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to throw it to you. After the Phalanx reaches out to the info ball, the info orb, takes it and is able to process it and devour it, where was your head at with all of that?
Well, it's pretty confusing because he's trying to display it physically, but it's not like a real physical thing that's happening. So the elder's conscience is in the Phalanx, but they don't know that they're actually there or not. They can't figure it out. So they have a question that they can answer. They can ask the Phalanx that they don't know at all. They couldn't know. So we asked them the question, and we get a very, very interesting answer that basically points to either Krakoa or his brother island potentially taking over the world.
Oh, I am so glad. So glad you mentioned that. So hacking into things or even just getting into any system, whether it's a digital system, a physical system, most of the time you have someone on the outside relaying to someone on the inside. So in order to make sure that they're successfully in, usually you will have them repeat something or say something, or like Wes said, there'll be a question and that specific answer needs to be given in order to verify we're in, we've made it in, we've penetrated the defenses, and at that point, then you can take over or do whatever job you need to. I'm going to go ahead and read the quote from the Phalanx because I'm so glad that Wes said that. So as they get in and as they're unsure if the Phalanx accepted, their information, their data, and through that, if they've penetrated, he says, if so, then you'll know the sequence as I know the sequence. And between us, we are the only two. So only the Phalanx and now that librarian or whoever that is knows the sequence. And the sequence was, and I believe the sequence is the sequence of events.
Mm-hmm.
The Phalanx say, there was a city on the mountain, and behind it the sun shone brightly, and then too brightly as it expanded to consume the city, the mountain, the world.
Yep.
I totally think that is a reference not only to Krakoa, but also to, even I'm forgetting the name of it. Arakko. I believe that's what it is. I believe through all this, Arakko is going to get enacted, and we all thought that all we had to do was deal with the multiple mutants and Krakoa expanding and the tumor expanding. But I'm starting to think we got another
because
thing
they're
coming.
Sealed in the chasm right now, and they're building underground. They're gonna accidentally release it.
I think they're accidentally going to release it.
That's the way I'm reading it. All right, so I I gotta ask you this question. Did you notice what happens on the? Is it? Yeah, it's the last page. Look at the colors.
Last page. Look at and the colors that the Phalanx turn into.
That the page goes. It goes from blue to gold.
Yeah,
You notice that?
I noticed that their faces weren't as blue anymore. All the light was shining on them, and it was yellow. Now,
portion of this story was gold? The X1 portion. That's a different lifetime. I think Jonathan Hickman might be swapping between lifetimes in X3. I'm almost certain of it.
Oh my gosh, dude!
You see how it goes from blue to gold?
Yeah, very apparently.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh!
But he doesn't. He's not denoting it with the normal little box at the top that tells you what time frame you're in. I think he's swapping around lifetimes in the X3 time frame.
He has to. Oh my gosh. All right. Well, shoot, that blew my mind alone. And the funny thing is, I'm gonna just kind of read a little bit of the last thing that they were mentioning, because they were asking like, "Hey, is it acceptable? The information, us getting in, and then we see the Phalanx start to change form, which was important. They're saying, and you see,
and you also notice that the Phalanx looks remarkably like Cypher's arms, because Warlock was obviously a Phalanx. So someone on Earth is already assimilated with Phalanx, which I thought was interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah, you see all the technopathy from Cypher's thing. So Cypher from Cypher to Cypher and Krakoa to Cypher and the Phalanx. Ooh. Krakoa and the Phalanx. Ooh. Ascend. Yo, this stuff is now we wait to see if they find it acceptable. And then Professor
X, they're in like a testing period. They said, yeah, you get it. We bring you in, and then if we feel like you're worthy, we upload you into like the primary like system, and you get to be a part of us. So it's this whole weird thing of evolution and
survival of the fittest.
Yes, it's they're not people, they're not mutants anymore. They're past that. But there's another level, and they're wanting to achieve that now because they've already become something bigger. So it's really interesting. It flows right in with everything that Hickman's doing with the whole series, and that whole X3 time frame, especially in this one where we get the most information by far, like presented, is a it's a mind screw. I don't even know what's going on.
And that's exactly how I wanted it. And then finally, we'll end on the last page, the last quote. Professor X, I'm not afraid of what I've done, but I do fear what it will one day cost. Professor X.
That is Mister Sinister, and there is a price to pay for your manipulations and dealings with a very, very evil entity.
There is always a price to pay. But with that being said, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap this one up. Read this book. This one you might have to read like 3 or 4 times, and I'm sure that every time you read it, you'll get more out of it. I'm going to read it more. I'm sure Wes is probably going to give it one more once over, because Wes is doing a show this weekend where there's an article talking about both books, and it has some of the theories and some of the stuff we've talked about, some of the things we haven't covered. So I may be a part of that this weekend, but it'll definitely be Wes. And a buddy of his, Doc. If you watch any of the live streams, the Comic Aficionados, you'll be familiar with him from there. Thank you so much for everybody who joined us live on Twitch. Kana Kagawa 7 coming in there with all sorts of theories and thoughts of their own. And Kana Kagawa will definitely talk about that more in a bit. But we're going to go ahead and take off for now. So for me, Skip and Tosh, and for Wes from Thinking Critical, thank you so much. Outside the Bleed, we'll catch you guys next time.
Thank you.